Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
One of the most sneaky popular football boots for the last several years has been the Nike Premier Series. If you've ever gone to buy a pair, you'll have noted that they're typically sold out in most sizes, and I'm not sure if that's down to Nike not making very many of them or them being as popular as I think they are. With that said, the Nike Premier 2 has not changed in a little while now, and it really hasn't had to. For $110, it is long-standing one of the best value for money football boots on the market, but we finally have a new variation in, as you would expect, the Nike Premier 3, a football boot that ultimately looks very similar, launched here in this very simple black and white colorway, but somewhat confusingly only available with the Soft Ground Pro anti-clog sole plate, although I'm sure that'll change in the near future. Retail on this, because they're only available in Europe as of right now, is 120 euros, which is roughly $135. Pretty well the same price as the Premier 2 with the same sole plate and stud pattern. In other words, no price increase, so expect the Premier 3 with the FG sole plate and stud pattern to retail for the same $110. The thing about the Nike Premier Series, however, is that it's all about simplicity, which is why we don't see frequent changes within the lineup, at least since it was first introduced with the OG Nike Premier. Now that there's a new model, that of course begs the question, have Nike changed too much? Is this an improvement or a step backwards? And that's exactly the question that I want to answer for you in today's video, because there are actually more changes to the Nike Premier 3 when compared to the Premier 2 than I think you might expect based on how they look. So if you're interested in learning more, including how they fit and feel on feet, please stick around and watch the entire review. And if you are interested in a pair of these for yourself, you can actually get them below the normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. The first significant change, and this has nothing to do with performance, but it definitely matters, especially in this day and age, is the look of the Nike Premier 3, which I think is a little bit more modern and arguably more fancy when compared to the Premier 2 that has kind of this older style shape to the Nike swoosh. You can see it's a much more modern shape to the new Nike Premier 3, and you'll also notice all of these extra details with the perforation in the leather on either side of the forefoot, this new design on the fold-over flap tongue, and then all of the debossing around the Nike Premier branding on the heel, which is something that I personally quite like the look of. The only thing that I'm not in love with, and maybe this will grow on me, is this little design element of this patch of synthetic leather going over top of the Nike swoosh towards the back of the heel. To me, it just looks a little bit chunky, but it also kind of reminds me of some of the older Nike Ronaldinho models, so I'm not entirely mad at it, but visually, I think the boots would have been a lot sleeker without that little bit. More importantly, the upper is where you're going to find the majority of the changes, where just like the Nike Premier 2, the Premier 3 still features a kangaroo leather upper. However, the stitching pattern and types of leather that you're going to find throughout the upper have actually changed quite significantly to where I would say the step-in comfort of the Premier 3 doesn't seem to be quite as good as it was on the Nike Premier 2. But I think objectively, this is a football boot that offers better lockdown and better responsiveness because of the strategically placed stiffer materials, some leather, some synthetic, the Nike have implemented here. Through the forefoot and toe box area, you're going to find really soft kangaroo leather. I would argue that it's a touch thinner than what we had on the Premier 2, but it's very, very difficult to say. You'll notice that you have stitches across the top of the forefoot and toe box, and then you have these two little kind of semicircles of perforated leather on either side with stitching kind of outlining that. I don't think the perforations are entirely necessary. It's more of a design element, and you can see all of the little holes have filled up with mud. That's lovely to see, but it's a design element nonetheless that is, again, not something you're really going to notice when you're playing in the boots. Through the midfoot, you're going to find that the boots are still made out of leather, basically up until this seam. So from here to there, that's leather, but along the lace holes, so right at the top, you can see there's a little extra piece right there. That's made from synthetic leather, and that actually makes a pretty big difference in terms of the lockdown of the boot. And I've also noticed that the leather they've used through the midfoot seems to be a little bit firmer and maybe a little bit thicker versus what you're going to find through the forefoot area, which means that the overall lockdown and security of this football boot with the laces tied tight is noticeably better when compared to the Nike Premier 2. And if you had any issues with Nike Premier models overstretching, this is something that should make a really big difference for you with the Nike Premier 3 and these little design changes that they've made. The laces, of course, still run directly down the middle, the tongue being made out of a synthetic leather material just like it was on the previous model. I'm not really a big fan of that. You still maintain the fold-over flap tongue that has the same general shape, also made from synthetic, which I guess is a little bit of a downgrade compared to the old one, which was actually made out of leather. This just feels a little bit stiffer, but ultimately isn't really that important to the overall performance of the boot. It just covers the laces. You have a little Velcro on the underside as well as on the tongue to help hold it down. And something that I really like this time around is you can see they give you a little outline there to actually have the option of cutting off the tongue. So I'm assuming if you go and do this, Nike is not going to void your warranty. So if you just don't like having this extra bulk across the top of your foot, or you just don't like the way this looks, you have the option to cut it away, which is something that I love to see from any football boot, let alone from a big brand like Nike. That's just really unusual these days. Moving to the rear, you're gonna find that the boot has maintained the same shape to the low cut design. You're gonna find an internal plastic heel counter that feels pretty well the same as well. And you're still gonna find this kind of synthetic suede heel lining material, although they have added these little micro perforations as kind of a design element that you don't feel at all when you're wearing the boots, but it does give them a little bit more of a premium vibe. Nonetheless, this feels really good. The lockdown is excellent. And again, for $110, this is a top-end heel liner. Then the insole, fully removable, it is a little bit different in that it's the same mesh lining on the surface, but it's made from a slightly softer Ortholite material, although this is a soft ground anti-clog version, and it's possible that the FG model will feature a slightly different insole. Nonetheless, this feels really good. And then moving to the base, this is a direct carryover of the Soft Ground Pro anti-clog sole plate that we had on the Premier 2. So nothing really new to talk about here, and I don't think they needed to change much. I love the anti-clog technology. It's one of very few boot technologies that undeniably works. For those that don't know much about it, water, which you're typically going to find in a soft ground natural grass environment, lubricates the surface of this anti-clog sole plate and doesn't allow mud to stick to it. So if you've ever played on a muddy pitch and had mud stick to the bottom of your boots, not only adding a ton of weight to the bottom of your feet, but building up so much that it kind of fills in all of your studs, causing you to slip a lot more, that is not going to happen with this anti-clog tech. It legitimately works and legitimately provides an advantage if you're playing on a really muddy pitch. And then as far as the soft ground studs are concerned, you have your 6 screw-in studs with metal tips, 2 in the heel, 4 in the forefoot, plastic ones kind of filling in the gaps to make it feel a little bit more like an FG stud pattern. And along with that anti-clog technology, it's a very effective layout for use on soft ground. And then there's the weight, where I think based on the way that they look, this very old school appearance, a lot of people just automatically assume that it's a heavy pair of football boots, and it's not. But of course you want to know, is the Nike Premier 3 heavier or lighter than the Nike Premier 2. Luckily, I have a Soft Ground Pro anti-clog pair handy to weigh them side by side, both in the same size, 9.5 US. We'll start off with the Nike Premier 2, and you can see that they weigh in at 9.25 ounces, the equivalent of 262 grams. If we change the scale back to ounces and we throw on the Nike Premier 3, you can see that they weigh in at 9.5 ounces, the equivalent of 270 grams. So you're talking about a weight difference of roughly 8 grams, which there might be 8 grams of mud still stuck on these football boots. It was very muddy conditions when I was testing them. Nonetheless, I don't think the weight has changed all that significantly from the Nike Premier 2, which means that for what it is, and especially for a pair of soft ground boots, in and around the 9.5 ounce range is actually really light. On feet, surprise, surprise, the Nike Premier 3 still feels like a Nike Premier. They haven't really made any significant changes to the overall shape of the boot, which means that if you fit really well in the Premier 1 and 2, you're still gonna fit great in the Nike Premier 3. What I will say is the step in comfort is maybe not as soft as the first two were, and I think that's simply down to the fact of them using slightly thicker materials through the midfoot as well as stiffer synthetics around the lacing area, which just makes for a more locked and responsive feel long term. And granted, these do soften up really quickly. It only takes about 20 minutes or so, and you completely forget that it's the Nike Premier 3 because they end up feeling a lot like the previous two Premiers. Again, the overall design ultimately hasn't changed all that much. As far as the overall width is concerned, because of that nice deep central lacing system with a regular tongue, you have tons of adjustability for expansion, and it's one of those football boots that's gonna fit just about everybody. I think the heel liner and the lockdown provided by that is fantastic. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you're looking to order a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, I'm pleased to report that the Nike Premier 3 carries on the legacy of the Nike Premier series in that it's still one of the best value for money products currently on the market. Whether or not it's an improvement over the Nike Premier 2, however, is a bit of a debate, because I think when you're talking about straight up step-in comfort, the Nike Premier 2 just feels softer across the board. I prefer the way that they feel on my feet when compared to the Premier 3. But when it comes to actually playing in the boots, especially long term, I've always found that the Nike Premier series does have that tendency to stretch a little bit more than I would like it to, where you end up with this fit and responsiveness level that maybe is a little bit sloppier than you would like it to be. That's kind of the downside of such a simple leather upper. And I feel like with the Nike Premier 3, they added reinforcements by way of what is admittedly cheaper feeling materials that do make for a more responsive, more secure, more locked in feel when the boots are on your feet. So while there may be a step backwards very slightly when it comes to comfort, I think they're a little bit of a step forward when it comes to the overall performance characteristics of the boot. It's still the same shape. They're still extremely comfortable once broken in. They're still incredible value for money. I love the idea of having the option of cutting off that fold over flap tongue, and I think the anti-clog sole plate at this price point is just incredible. Truly a game changer if you regularly play on soft ground pitches. For what it costs, the Nike Premier 3 is a boot that I can very strongly recommend.